It's July 1829. The young, popular governor of Maine gives a speech at the building you see right behind me here, dedicating the new capital here in Augusta. 3 months later, he's dead. 184 years after his death, mystery still surrounds just about everything about him. Who was he? How did he die? And why is Enoch Lincoln one of Maine's historical footnotes? After Maine separated from Massachusetts in 1820 as part of the Missouri Compromise, Portland became its first official capital. It wasn't too long, though, of course, before they realized that they wanted a more central location for the permanent seat of legislature. So many cities started vying for the title of capital city. Belfast, Waterville, Wiscasset, Hallowell, among others, they all thought they would be perfect. But another town itself, rich in history, at the mouth of the Kennebec River, had the support of the young and popular governor. His name was Enoch Lincoln. He was the 6th governor of Maine and heralded as Maine's first poet. He was born in Worcester, Mass, December 28, 1788. His aptitude was so great that he entered Harvard at age 18, not as a freshman, mind you, but as a sophomore. By the age of 23, he was admitted to the bar. Now, legend has it that he was so popular and so well-liked that the people of Freiburg promised to vote him into Congress if he would just move to their town and promote their district. Whether or not that legend is true, Enoch Lincoln did move to Freiburg in 1812 and was elected to Congress shortly thereafter. But it was not just his skills as an orator that made Enoch Lincoln a rich and wonderful personality. He had just everything about him that people liked. He was congenial, outgoing. He was a people person, a real person who just loved to be around people. He also had thoughts that were well ahead of his time. He was avidly against slavery. He fought for women's rights. He was a 20th century man stuck in the 1800s. Young Enoch was an elaborate storyteller. It was while he lived in Freiburg, Maine, that he wrote Our Village, a 2,000-line poem about life in Freiburg. The poem described in great length the plight of the woodsmen, hunters, native Indians, slaves, and people of all walks of life. He further displayed his forward thinking in his quest to preserve native culture. He was a collector of Indian artifacts, and he fervently studied all manner of their customs and language. He purchased a house in Scarborough, Maine, where, in his retirement, he had hoped to publish several volumes on the subject, an encyclopedia of Maine's native culture, but unfortunately for history, he never got the chance to realize his dreams. Although he was small in stature, it was clear that Enoch Lincoln had big ideas about life, social justice, and equality. In 1826, Enoch Lincoln was once again called upon by the people of the state of Maine to serve, this time as their governor. He was swept into office by a huge majority. He was a real man of the people at the head of the state. His term was defined by the northeastern boundary dispute and cementing Augusta's place at the capital of Maine. Lincoln loved public speaking. It was one of his many passions, and he never turned down an opportunity to deliver a speech on any issue that he felt strongly about. Of course, one of those issues was the new Capitol building, the foundation of which was laid in July 1829. Mr. Lincoln was called upon to give a speech at the cornerstone laying ceremony.
So in October of the same year, Governor Lincoln was called upon again to give a speech at something that was very near and dear to his heart. As I mentioned earlier, he was a strong proponent of women's rights and women's education. And when the Coney School for Women's Education opened up, he could not wait to give the speech. There was a little problem, though. At this point in his life, Enoch Lincoln grew dreadfully ill. His friends begged him. They begged him not to do the speech. His quote was, "I must. It is my duty." By the end of his speech, his friends had given him a chair just to sit in, just so he could finish the speech. After he gave his speech, where he accredited much of who he became to the love and support from the women in his life, such as his mother, he was rushed away from the site of the speech and rushed straight to his deathbed. 8 days later, he died. And here's his portrait in the gallery of portraits at the Maine State Capitol. The records show that he entered office with, as you can see in the picture, fair complexion, clear eyes, and a full head of blonde hair. 3 years later, he was dead. Why? Well, the short answer is, we don't know. The symptoms that he had are basically associated, well, or at least what we would associate with today, of nothing more than a common cold.
Directly behind me is the tomb of Enoch Lincoln. At least this is where he was buried. He was here, of course, when they buried him. He was here about 15 years later when they put the monument, the obelisk that you see over the top of him. He was here in 1903 when they did repairs to the tomb, much needed repairs as it had fallen in vast disarray. Some years later, they discovered he's not here. Neither were the dignitaries who were buried with him. Enoch Lincoln literally has been lost to history. We have no idea where he's buried now. No one has any viable evidence. Anybody who tries to do research on where his body ended up comes up with negative evidence. Completely cold trail. Luckily, though, his ideas were not lost to history. His forward-thinking way that he looked at the issues that were important to him. Women's rights, women's education, Native American culture preservation, his abolitionist views. These were the ideas that won history. These were the ideas that shaped not only the time of his life, but shaped the next century that followed after he died. Fortunately for Enoch Lincoln, he did not live to see the abolition of the slaves. It was his younger, distant cousin who had the privilege of issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves on this continent for all time.